Today is Friday, May 29th, 2015, and we're here today to talk with Sister Karen Egri. Our first question is, we would like to know about your journey of faith. What led you to your calling?
Well, my journey is probably the most convoluted of many. By the time I graduated high school, I was convinced that I really did want to become a sister. But I really wasn't quite ready to, more mature enough to do that, and was recommended that I wait. And so I ended up a year and a half after high school, and at that point came to know Sister Rochelle Harper, who at that time was the vocation director. And I ended up entering the Sisters of Mercy in 1969, drawn at that point because I wanted to be closer to God and wanted to be of service, that I knew that I wanted to be for others. And Mercy was at a transition point that they were progressive and they were open to lots of new ideas. So I figured that was a good thing. So I did enter. I went through my regular formation as everyone else did, but during my time in my temporary vows, I became very aware of the fact that I had no clue of who I was as me, and decided at that point to leave. So I left the community in 1975, and for the next 19 years did a variety of things, but a majority of that time I was trained at Mercy College as an elementary teacher, and so from there I taught elementary school, and then I became involved with Project Head Start, which is celebrating its 50th year this year, and worked with Macomb County Head Start for 20 years. And it was during that time that there's also an entity called Mercy Associates, and Mercy Associates are men and women who really feel called to live out mercy as a charism, stay connected, want to be part of a group that has a strong spirituality and a sense of community and service and mission. And so I decided that that was my best way of really expressing my call, because mercy was still such a part of my life. So I made my covenant as a Mercy Associate in 1989. By 1993, I asked one of the sisters here what consecration meant. There was still just a hole that wasn't full. And I asked one of the 90-year-old sisters what the word consecration meant to her. And she thought about it, and we talked a long time about it being that you were a committed part of God, and God was a part committed to you. And I thought, okay. So I re-entered the community in 1994 at the age of 49, and went through formation again, and here I am today. So it's been 21 years, and I've already celebrated my silver jubilee because we counted the first 6 years. So I celebrated my silver jubilee 25 years in 2013. So I've worked in Mercy. I became the director of Mercy Education Project, so I have been a sister. I have not been a sister. I've been an associate. I have missioned and ministered with Mercy as a co-minister, and now I am once again a vowed member. So it's a checkered past, to say the least.
Thank you. I think you sort of answered the next question, is why did you choose the Sisters of Mercy as opposed to another religious order?
I had considered the Sisters of Charity from Cincinnati initially, and I think what I said a minute ago was that Mercy, that was late 60s were when all the changes were happening. Folks were coming out of habit. They went to a modified habit. They were looking at doing different things, as opposed to just teaching, just nursing. They really started, and Mercy started really becoming involved with social services, and that was what the attraction was. Although I was an educator, still consider myself an educator, they were putting it in the context of social services, of how do we attack systematically and systemically the causes of poverty and so forth. And Mercy was actively already doing that when I re-entered. So that call to service, the call to do it in a context of, because I was already doing service. I had worked with women and children at Head Start. So I didn't need to come back in order to do service. But I needed to come back to be part of a group of women who are dedicated to their God in the context of doing that ministry and living it with a community and sharing in that joy of being with a group of very educated, intelligent, and committed women.
Thank you. Now we're curious about your time at Mercy College. We understand that you were a student there, so that was your role. Your training, you were elementary?
I got my major was psychology with a minor in sociology and elementary education, because education couldn't be your major. It was what you could then get certified in either secondary or elementary. And at that point I became certified in elementary. So I was a student from '69 to December of '73. It was just a wonderful place to be. It was small, it was intimate, and I wasn't overwhelmed because I wasn't exactly the most amazing academia kid in the world. School was not easy, so I couldn't imagine being at a larger institution. So from that point of view, being that student, being allowed to explore with others that were at the college what and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to be, that was very nurturing. I'm not sure I answered that question because I think I got it lost in the middle over there someplace.
You did.
So did you end up teaching? So you were an
Yes.
ended up spending your time teaching elementary school children.
Right.
Was there a certain age group that you...
I really preferred fourth graders. They were old enough not to have to be babied, but young enough not to be obnoxious, sort of. If I went back into the classroom now, I'd probably go with third graders because that dynamic has moved down at this point.
Do you have a favorite story or a favorite memory from your time as a student at
Yes,
Mercy
I was
College?
thinking about that the other day. I ended up smiling. I lived on third floor in the administration building because third and fourth floors were the convents where the sisters who taught at the college, worked from the college, lived. So I lived on third floor. And of course the dorm was full, and I ended up having a very, very good friend who is still a friend today, was not a sister at the time. And our favorite spot became, we had a group, I wouldn't say cult, group, who hung out together. And it was 4 or 5 of us women and 2 or 3 of the guys. And one of our favorite spots was behind the altar in the chapel. And we would end up with, if all of you have been college students at one time and you remember those philosophical, intensive conversations that you were going to remake the world and this is how you were going to do it, and you also decided among yourselves what role everyone was going to play in this whole new empire that you were going to build, or how you were going to make a difference. And somehow behind the altar in the chapel became the meeting place. And we, it was, I could come down from the third floor at 11 o'clock at night. Nobody knew particularly that I had escaped, and nobody knew, that the other people got out of the dorms, and we just met over there. Sometimes it was 2 of us, sometimes it was 5 of us, but it became our spot as opposed to trying to meet over in the commons and everything else. That was our spot. Many, many dreams were born. Many of them have been lived out, and a lot of fun and a lot of intensity that was shared. And then Sister Carol did end up entering, so we've made a lot of those dreams come true, and those are my happy memories of that other than having a snowball fight where Carol tore my coat. And she will kill me when she hears that I said that on tape. But yes, and she claims she never did, but honest, she did. It was a new coat, too. On the front lawn, no less. Sister Agnes Mary Mansour wasn't pleased with us, however. That was inappropriate behavior in the front of the administration building. But could we take our folderol someplace else? So we did.
Sounds like it was a great experience.
It was. It was.
So, how has your roles as a Sister of Mercy changed over the years? You sort of explained it, but we're kind of interested in, did you do any work in the city of Detroit? How about in Michigan? And just with the Sisters of Mercy of America?
My role has taken on several dimensions. Early on, as I mentioned, I was an elementary teacher and taught up in Rogers City, Michigan, Rogers City, okay. And I ended up leaving from there, but it was still a wonderful experience. Taught 4th grade at Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish in Detroit, which is no longer there, but was a phenomenal environment to teach in, with several other folks. Lived at the IHN convent. Oh no, scratch that. That was after I left. But I lived nearby. And it was a way in which it enabled me to make a smooth transition from community out back into laity. It bridged that gap, and it was wonderful to be teaching at a school that was a mercy school. Sister Stephanie Holig was principal for, 25 years, something insane. But she was just dynamic and wonderful to teach under and learn from. After I left, I really continued to be Mercy, working for Macomb County Head Start for at that point, 18 years, was a way for me to embody Catherine McCauley's care for women and children, and it met that need. It was wonderful. It was another way of constantly being Mercy. After I did return, I ended up being the director of Mercy Education Project, which is in Detroit. It's in Southwest Detroit. It used to be, at St. Vincent Middle School, down by Tiger Stadium. That whole area in the shadow of the train station. And I followed Sister Kenise Johnson, who was the founder and has recently gone to her God, and will be very, very badly missed. I followed her as the second director, and that was extremely challenging because you're running a nonprofit and you're learning all about how to run a nonprofit while doing it. Called on-the-job training. So serving the women in the Mercy Education Project provides after-school tutoring for elementary age girls, now elementary and high school girls, and provides literacy through GED completion for women, ages 18 to 90, and I mean that literally. And through that, it's just wonderful to watch that grow and be a part of that. University of Detroit Mercy then is still a partner with MEP. They've held their summer girls program at UDM for the last 7 years. It was commented on in the last Spiritus that just came out. There was a reference to that. So my role continues to change. My commitment to the city of Detroit, as most of ours are, is to be advocates, is to try and deal with the causes of the poverty while also doing direct service. So it becomes a mix of both. So those are some of the roles that change, but the name of the game is networking, and you're not doing this alone by any stretch of the imagination. There's lots of people involved with Detroit.
Thank you. How do you connect on a personal level to the mission of the Sisters of Mercy?
The mission is vowed life is my essence, and my God is my essence. And what that means is that I need to be with my God in order to be for other people. We end up calling it contemplation in action, that you've got to be able to be centered enough to give what you are also receiving. So for me personally, life without service of some kind makes no sense. It becomes just so self-oriented that it would just stifle, and I would end up without having any water in the well. It just refills by giving. The other piece to that is the need for folks that understand that spirituality, that can nurture and nourish that spirituality through community, which in today's world is pretty countercultural. We don't tend to turn in our paychecks and say, spend the money on whatever you want to spend it on, or trusting that then I'm going to be taken care of. So personally, all of that comes together: ministry, spirituality, and community. And that's part of who I am as a person. So I can't separate the personal from the rest of it.
Okay. What are you doing now? You've been talking this whole time about what you do and what you did, but could you tell us again what you're doing now?
After I left Mercy Education Project at a point where it needed new leadership, it just felt that it was a time that it needed new energy. Following that, I did go to the College of St. Mary in Omaha, Nebraska for 3 years, and worked as the director of a program they have called Mothers Living and Learning. And what's different about that is they have single moms with up to 2 children under the age of 10 living in one of the residence halls. And at the time I joined that, they had never had a dedicated director. We had 35 women and 59 children living in actually what was their 3rd and 4th floor of their administration building, because when Mercy College was built, and there were several other colleges all built in Mercy across the country, they just all shared the same plans. They just said, they had an architect draw up phenomenal plans. It worked in Michigan, it'll work in Iowa, it'll work in Nebraska, it'll work in California. So most of the convents that were built at that time in colleges used the same format, the same floor plans. So Mothers Living and Learning was on 3rd and 4th floors. They have since built a dedicated dorm just for Mothers Living and Learning, residence hall. Get in real big trouble on college campuses saying dorm these days. Anyway, yeah, it's a residence hall. Anyway, since I've been back in Detroit, which has been since 2010, I've really done a lot of my time has been spent with Mercy Volunteer Corps, which is not Mercy Associates. Mercy Volunteer Corps is a national organization that provides volunteers to a variety of cities throughout the United States and in Guam. And Detroit has been fortunate for the last, we're coming up on 10 years, of having anywhere from 2 to 4 Mercy volunteers in the city. The volunteers are generally graduates from college. Some of them choose to do a year of service after college before they become employed. However, couples are welcome. Older folks are welcome. Detroit has had volunteers as old as 59 and as young as 21. So everything in between. They spend a year of service with simple living in community, spirituality, and ministry. And I'm missing one. Yeah, it's 5. Anyway, there are currently 4 volunteers in Detroit. They live on Clark Street, right across from Clark Park in Southwest Detroit. One works at Mercy Education Project. One is at Cabrini Clinic, which is the longest sustained clinic for the uninsured and now underinsured in the United States, and is located also in Southwest Detroit. Another is working at Mercy Primary Care, which also serves underinsured in what was in the Samaritan Center on Connor. Yes. And then the 4th person is at Crystal Ray High School, which is also in Southwest Detroit, also founded partly by Sister Kenny Johnson. So they keep me busy. Their delight this year, they range in age from 22 to 27. What's pretty unique and wonderful about working with Mercy volunteers is that although Detroit is usually the last place people choose to come, and the last place people's parents want them to come, it's been wonderful to watch. We have over 10 of former volunteers who stayed in Michigan. They stayed in Detroit. They are still working in Detroit. They're still ministering in Detroit. They have come to love the city. One of our current volunteers will continue a 2nd year in Mercy Volunteer Corps and continue teaching at Crystal Ray. And one of the other volunteers has already gotten employment with a nonprofit and will be staying in Detroit as well. So that's pretty exciting. So part of my job is to make sure their needs are met. Their housing, make sure the cars are working, all of those kinds of things. I also am currently part of the Sisters of Mercy West Midwest new membership team, and right now that team is made up of 6 folks, and so I help provide support for vocation ministers and the one incorporation minister that we have. So the vocation ministers, there are 4, and they work with women who are considering religious life, and up to the point of them entering religious life, at which point the incorporation or formation minister then works with them during their formation time. I do wonderful things like keep minutes, set up meetings, do some research on some new trends in vocation work to try and find other ways in which we can be more visible and provide an opportunity for women to kind of at least explore and discern what their future might be. So that's my role with that. So there are several other community roles, but those are the primary roles, and I still provide some support to Mercy Education Project. So it kind of keeps me out of trouble.
As a person who was looking at retirement in the next few years,
yes,
I noticed you didn't have retired people in the Mercy Volunteer Corps. Is that something you would move into?
Oh no, there have been retired folks in Mercy Volunteer Corps.
Because you had mentioned only to 59.
There have been, especially older couples that have come, and some older retirees that I believe there's no age limit.
Okay.
So I know that there has been, I'm trying to think, Mary Buck was retired, but she had retired early, but she was one of the 58, 59 folks that stayed for 2 years, as a matter of fact. So no, there's no age limit for that at all. It's really great.
Okay, our last question now is,
yes,
is there anything that we haven't discussed, haven't asked you, that you feel you want to talk about, or you want to expound upon?
I think the thing that Mercy College had was sense of community, not just with students, but with faculty and staff. As a student and then as an adult, knowing other individuals that worked at at Mercy College, the connectedness among faculty and staff was very life-giving. There was very little distinction made between faculty and staff. And I guess I have a different perspective of that because of my one experience in Nebraska in academia, which I learned very quickly is not my gift at all. But I became aware that in a lot of academic settings, there's a strata that exists. And I never sensed that strata at Mercy College. I have been more aware of it with UDM, but that's not firsthand experience. So I think Mercy College gave us all a sense of mission and ministry, a sense that what our lives are more than it's more than ourselves. And it didn't matter whether you were religious or just a regular student or whatever, that was still the message you walked away with and felt commissioned to be. And again, it didn't matter what direction you went in, it just still meant that you had an obligation to give back, to be for other folks. So I think that was part of the gift of knowing that people cared. So I guess the fact that I don't remember them being an actual position of mission effectiveness, because it was everyone's mission, and everyone knew Catherine McCauley, and everyone knew what and why sisters were there, and as a faculty, they knew why they were there as well, and that was to educate, to care, and to carry out the mission of Catherine McCauley.
Thank you very much for giving us your time today. I find your life very inspiring, and I'm actually looking forward to listening to the tape again.
And making any and all edits necessary.
No, I didn't see any in your part.
It went pretty smooth.